So there's a few models of singleness in the scriptures. Hagar was not only single, she was a single parent. Naomi was married, her husband died, and she remained a single for the rest of her life when her husband died early. Paul, the apostle who wrote most of the New Testament, was single. And the greatest role model of all chose not to get married, Jesus. The one who redeemed us chose not to get married. And so I want to challenge and try to encourage singles in their singleness. I also have a goal in this message to sensitize the church to the uniqueness, the unique blessings of being single. It's not as bad, single folk, as you might think singleness is. I also want to challenge our church and married folks. I want to challenge people who are married and the church not to look down or speak down to singles.
Were you recently injured in a car accident? If so, you need to stop now and immediately call an experienced auto accident attorney. Unfortunately, we've seen too many car accident victims attempt to settle cases on their own without the help.
There's an unspoken air and attitude in our culture and community regarding marriage. There's an expectation. Sometimes people say to unmarried women, "Child, you ain't married by now?" We think that women ought to be married by a certain age. Often we remind them that their biological clock is ticking. We make statements and sometimes thoughts even cross your mind that makes you think that you're not complete or whole unless you're married. We say things like, "When you gonna get married? You ain't found the right person yet?" So forth and so on. But people are in a single status for lots of reasons. First of all, there's some folks who have never been married, and so they're single. There's some folks who are widowed. They've been married, but they've lost their loved one, their spouse, and so they're in a single status. And then we got some people who are divorced whose spouse has remarried. So if you are divorced and your spouse has remarried, you're single. I'll leave the rest of that up for y'all to figure out about those other things. Been talking about that for the past several weeks, so you can, if you weren't here, you need to get the tapes. But we ought to spend a few moments because oftentimes people look at singleness in a negative light. I think we need to set the record straight for everybody to understand that it is not the will of God for everybody to be married. Yeah, it's going to be a long service here today, I can tell. It is not the will of God for every person to get married. We might as well come to grips with that reality. That is the truth. Everybody's not going to get married. Pastor Jenkins, how can you say that with such confidence and boldness? Here's why I can say it. Just the statistics alone tell us that everybody's not going to get married, because for every one man, there's 8 women in our community. That statistic alone tells you, with 8 women for every one man. I know I'm not telling the ladies none that they don't already know that the pickings are slim. There's already a few number of men, and then that's further reduced because there's a huge number of men who are either in jail or can't decide if they want to be a male or a female.
Sprouts myth number 3. It's just another grocery store.
With fresh organic produce everywhere, it's a...
So, with that in mind, it's not the will of God for everybody to get married. How should you and how ought you to approach your singleness? Well, Paul says two things, two simple points I got for y'all. Can y'all stay awake for these 2 points? Here's what he says in verse number 7. I got 2 simple points. I'm going to let y'all go. Here's the first thing he says. For I wish that all men were even as myself, verse 7. But each one has his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that. Listen to what he says. Paul the apostle, the writer of most of the New Testament, who is single himself, writes to the church in Corinth and in essence says to them, I wish that everybody was like me in a mode of singleness. And he says this, here's my first point. He says, but each one has his own gift. The first thing he says about singleness is that it is a gift. It is a gift. Somebody say it's a gift. The problem is that we have not treated singleness as a gift. We have treated it like it's a burden, like it's a pain, like it's a problem, like there's something wrong with people who are single. But according to Paul, he says that's not the way you ought to approach singleness. You ought to approach it from a perspective is that it is a gift that came from God. God has given to you the gift of singleness. Now, it's interesting to me that he uses this Greek word, charisma is the Greek word. It's the Greek word gift. It means a spiritual endowment. It means a gratuity, a tip. It's a tip. When you go to the restaurant and you get serviced and you want to show your gratitude to somebody, you give them a tip. It's the same word. He says that when God gave you a gift, when he gave you singleness, it was a tip. He says, I'm going to give you something extra. I'm not going to charge you anything for it. I'm going to give you a gratuity. I'm going to tip you. Now I see y'all can't even get that in your head. You can't wrap your mind around that when God put you in a posture of singleness, he gave it to you as a benefit to you. It is the same word that is used in Romans chapter 6 verse 23 when it says, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. It's the same Greek word. He says it is a gift. It is something freely that God gave to you that is to your benefit. Singleness is a gift. You treat a gift, you ought to treat a gift like with love. You ought to accept it. You ought to embrace it. You ought to be grateful for it. You ought to thank God that he thought enough of you, that he trusted you with the gift of singleness, because everybody can't handle singleness. It's not a curse. It's not a sign of rejection. It's not a burden. It's a gift. As a matter of fact, the divine sovereign God that we serve gave this special gift to you, and it is especially for you. Listen to what the text says again. For he says, for I wish that all men were even as myself, but each one has his own gift from God. Each one has his own gift from God. It is not only a gift, but it is a gift from God. And look at what it says. Each one has his own gift. God gave you this gift. He gave it especially and specifically for you. Now, why did he give you this gift? Many reasons he probably gave you the gift. Maybe he gave you the gift of singleness because marriage might have been too traumatic for you. It might have been too dramatic and too traumatic. It might have been both. Maybe he gave you the gift of singleness because marriage may have hindered you from advancing his kingdom. He gave you the gift of singleness because he saw that you could better advance his kingdom in a status of singleness than you could in a status of being married. Such enthusiasm over this. Goddamn.